if somebody wants to get a hair transplant, but he also considers SMP, what should be the flow? Should the hair transplant be done first? Should the SMP be done first?
I'm going to break that down to in two perspectives. One from a doctor and one from an SMP artist. When we're looking at a scalp, and if I complete the SMP, right, so option one, doing the SMP first. If we complete the SMP, say on a Norwood 6, Norwood 5, because they haven't got enough grafts, so they need a combination procedure, right? Or they need that textured kind of feel, look, whatever. If I complete the artwork, and then you have a doctor that goes in, creates the incisions within the SMP, what happens is it triggers the macrophages within the skin, the white blood cells. And what that does, it fights off the SMP, and it might soften the SMP and also will migrate the SMP, because obviously it's a foreign body. Your white blood cells will be triggered to kind of fight off the SMP, the ink within the scalp, the pigment. So what will happen if you have a hair transplant done after the SMP? It's like putting a, how can I put it? It's like putting a lawnmower on top of a carpet. It will damage the SMP and you'll get migration. It will soften. Now, obviously, that isn't, if you get a slight migration, that isn't a major issue if you're keeping your hair long. But if you want that artistic finish, it's better doing it the other way around, where the doctor has full control of creating a low density FUE procedure, so they get a nice, equal amount of grafts all over the scalp, including the crown and the vertex area and so on, and they create the hairline using the actual FUE grafts. And then what happens is 6 months later, I can go in and apply a full illusion and density once the skin's healed to that transplanted hair, and that's what we find gives it the best finish.
So that would mean never do the SMP first. Always do hair transplant.
Hair transplant first, yeah. And then we'll just go in, and if there's any scars, we can obviously cover up the scars and really create a nice finished look, and just go in between the existing hairs, the infills that we call, because obviously the grafts can't be implanted very close to each other. And with the SMP, we can really give it some good density. And also mentioning, when the doctor creates the incisions, imagine I've got a head of SMP. When the doctor creates the incisions, the gauges that they use, they're not going straight in. Sometimes they're going at a slanted direction to let the hair grow at a direction. It's not really upright. So that causes a lot of trauma on the skin. And obviously with SMP, we're looking at high density, right? Because obviously we're not limited, like a transplant doctor is limited with the amount of grafts they can transplant from the back to the front. We're not limited with the pigment that we use. So we really layer it in and get a lot of density in there to give it like a full illusion. So it's hard for a doctor to kind of find empty spots. And also it'll be easier for a doctor to work on a bold scalp, so they know exactly where to kind of put in the grafts and get a nice symmetrical finish, which will give you a better result.
So after 6 months, it's usually the time where most of the time you would recommend a client a SMP after a hair transplant done 6 months ago.
Exactly. Well, after the shredding phase and so on. Yeah. So about 6 months ideally. But sometimes clients want it sooner. Obviously, if they want a procedure, they want it done now, right? That's the problem. People, a lot of clients don't like waiting. So we can have like an analysis with the doctor, maybe 4 or 5 months later, to see if their client is now suitable for the SMP. Just making sure the skin is completely healed, right? Because there's a lot of complications. So let's make the skin as at least the skin is completely healed before we start applying the SMP.
So do you like have that doctor that works at the clinic on a different floor?
Correct. We are based within a hair transplant clinic as well. So we've got a hair transplant surgery, for those that don't know, upstairs, and we've got an SMP clinic downstairs, right? 2 separate businesses, but we work in conjunction with each other very closely. Correct.
He assesses or helps you assess those patients?
Correct.
If you're not sure whether to proceed or not.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it for sure. Yeah. Like personally, I will be waiting maybe 9 or 10 months just to be sure that, close to 100% of those grafts actually grew in, because that's usually not sure. Like by the 6-month mark, you can get as much as 80%, but also as few as 50% only growing. So it's good to wait a little bit to get a picture of what you will have, and then do the SMP.
Yeah,
right?
and that's happened a few times.
Yeah.
It depends from body to body, right?
Yeah. Also on the crown, usually the results take a little bit longer to grow, so it's good to wait.